Are you really hard on yourself? Do you have high and unrealistic expectations? Are you really harsh if you make even the smallest mistake? And are you critical towards yourself and mean to yourself if things don't work out the way that you might have expected them to? Are you your own worst critic? When you're a high achiever who struggles with anxiety, stress, and overwhelm, then you might have the tendency to put a lot of pressure on yourself and have a harsh inner critic. And you might even think that it's motivating you, or you might have tried to change it in the past and it doesn't stick around for long. So, the tendency to be hard on yourself can be deep rooted. And in this episode, I'll be discussing why that is and what you can do about it. This is episode number 94. Welcome to Calmly Coping. My name is Tati, and I'm a licensed therapist and coach specializing in high-functioning anxiety. I help high achievers overcome stress, anxiety, and overwhelm so they can finally stop overthinking everything. Thank you so much for tuning in. If this topic interests you, then please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so that you get notified every time I release a new episode. I used to be very hard on myself. I would criticize myself anytime I made errors in grammar or mistakes when I was practicing piano, which, side note, made it very unenjoyable. I was judging myself for feeling anxious or not feeling good. And now when I look back on those times, I realize that it just made me feel terrible. And there can often be these common experiences in which we are hard on ourselves and we think it might be motivating or helping us feel better, when at the end of the day, it just results in you feeling worse. So why might you be hard on yourself? I'm going to talk about 3 reasons as to why you might struggle with being hard on yourself. The first one is culture and society. So this might be that, you might have learned it's motivating to be hard on yourself. The idea of tough love, and especially in past generations, they viewed it as strong and as being strong to be hard on yourself and give that tough love, and motivating children more by punishment than by positive reinforcement. Especially in older generations, any vulnerability or signs of emotions were viewed as being a weakness. And so you might have created a negative association in your mind that if you're vulnerable or showing any sort of emotion or being kind to yourself, then that might be viewed as a weakness and something that you shouldn't be doing. So that might be one reason why you could have learned to be hard on yourself, because of that association that especially past generations, but also our culture and society in general might hold. It can differ depending on which culture your family may have come from or you grew up in. Another reason why you might be hard on yourself can result from parents or caregivers. So especially when it comes to when you were a child growing up, the speech and the way that the adults in your life may have communicated and treated you can absolutely have an impact on the way that you speak to yourself. So it could be that, in this example, maybe the way that your parent or caregiver spoke to you was a projection of the way that they spoke to themselves. And so then you may have heard this and then internalize this speech yourself. Sometimes the speech of the critical things that we say to ourselves can be repetitions of things that you might have heard growing up. Another way that this might show up is if you experience any abuse. And of course, that is a traumatic experience that you may have had. And, if you experienced any physical or verbal or any other sort of abuse, that can also have an impact on the way that you treat yourself and on the way that you speak to yourself. And additionally, if you experienced any bullying or maybe even being picked on by siblings or other peers, this may also have an impact on you being hard on yourself. Maybe you had negative experiences in which you were picked on or criticized, and as a result, you might have internalized this feedback from others and then started to speak that way towards yourself. So it could be some of these things that you experienced, all of them, or it could even be something different. This isn't necessarily an exhaustive list as to the reasons why you're hard on yourself, because each and every person has a unique experience and upbringing that has an impact on the way that they speak to themselves and behave in adulthood. So I want to talk about your inner critic because I mentioned that phrase a few times. According to Wikipedia, the inner critic or that critical inner voice is a concept used in popular psychology and psychotherapy to refer to a subpersonality that judges and demeans a person. So, this is that internal voice that many of us have that is that own worst critic that we often have. And it's that voice that when you do something, you might say things like, oh, you're so stupid, or why'd you have to mess up like that? Or what's wrong with you? It's that voice where you can be really hard on yourself and put a lot of pressure on yourself. And it's often not warranted. It might be an exaggeration as to what's actually happening in the moment. So before we get into what happens when you're hard on yourself and how it affects you, I want to quickly talk about my high functioning anxiety quiz. So if you haven't taken it yet, it is a free quiz that you can download and will help you understand if you're struggling with high functioning anxiety. And if so, give you personalized results and resources so that you can take the first step towards feeling better and feeling calmer from within. You can get this by going to hfaquiz.com. So, what happens when you're hard on yourself? There's a few things that happen. You end up feeling worse. You just feel crappy because you're being on yourself and you're being mean to yourself. And you're focusing on what's wrong rather than what's right. So you're hyper focused on what went wrong or what's wrong with you potentially, and ignoring all of the things that you're doing well or ignoring your strengths. You might also feel unmotivated when you're critical towards yourself because it's harder to feel motivated when somebody's beating you down. If you think of somebody saying like, oh, you're so stupid, I can't believe you did that. Are you going to feel motivated to continue? Maybe there might be some anger underneath that motivation to prove yourself, but ultimately, it's going to be more difficult to genuinely feel motivated. That's not coming from a place of that anger or other strong, difficult emotion. You might also project this harsh, critical voice onto others around you, especially those that you are close to. So it could be a partner, children, family members. The way we speak to others close to us, and I mean close by like those people that you see on a regular daily basis, or you have very close relationships with like immediate family members, the way we speak to them can often be a reflection of the way we speak to ourselves. And so if you're being harsh and critical towards yourself, then you may start being that way towards those around you. And so then that's going to have a negative impact on your relationships and on your communication. Additionally, you might see closed doors instead of open ones. When you're being hard on yourself, you're automatically thinking from a negative place. And so positive psychology has a theory, it's called the broaden and build theory. So it kind of draws on this concept that when you're focusing on the negative, then you're going to see closed doors. It's going to be more difficult for you to see opportunities and want to feel comfortable putting yourself out there, versus if you're being kind to yourself or you're focusing on the positive, you're going to be more open to other opportunities and be more focused on the potential that's out there for you. And when you're hard on yourself, you also might lack confidence. Because if you think about it, if you're being mean to yourself all day, then it's going to be really hard to feel confident because you're constantly focusing on your negative qualities and traits and putting yourself down. So now that we've talked about all of the negative things that can happen when you're hard on yourself, let's talk about what happens when you're kind to yourself. And this is the concept of self-compassion. So self-compassion is the idea of being kind to yourself and speaking to yourself like you would to a friend. So when you're more self-compassionate, you're actually more resilient and better able to cope with stress, failure, and difficulty. And this is all supported by research, everything that I'm going to list. If you want more information on the research behind self-compassion, you can go to self-compassion.org and find all of that information there. So research shows that self-compassionate people are actually less afraid of failure and more willing to take risks and try again. So there can often be this fear that like, if I'm too kind to myself or I'm too easy on myself, then I'm not going to be motivated to try, when studies actually show that it's the opposite. And if you think about it, if you're kinder and supportive to yourself, then you are going to feel better and you're going to feel more willing to try because you're not going to be afraid of the criticism or afraid of feeling bad when things don't go well because you're being supportive and uplifting yourself. Additionally, giving compassion to ourselves allows us to give more to others in relationship. It's the concept of filling up your cup first. When you fill up your cup first, you're better able to give and be there for others. Research also shows that self-compassionate people engage in healthier behaviors. So these are things like, eating healthier, exercising, and the things that we all know help us to feel better. There's an association between that self-compassionate behavior towards yourself and engaging in these healthy habits and behaviors. So based on what I've just shared, it's really, you only have things to gain from being kind to yourself. And so if you're struggling with being hard on yourself, then one easy tip to start practicing self-compassion today, start practicing it right now, is to speak to yourself like you would to a friend. So it's often easier to be kind to a friend and to be supportive to a friend. And unfortunately, it's not that easy to be kind to ourselves. So I will often ask my clients and tell them, with the situation you're in right now, what would you say to a friend who's going through what you're going through right now? And oftentimes they will say such supportive and compassionate things. And I just tell them, what you just said, imagine you're saying that to yourself. And the more that you practice that, then the easier it becomes. So your action tip is to catch your inner critic. Don't judge yourself, because when you're judging yourself or being critical, you're just creating more criticism, but just notice it and then switch to self-compassion and ask that simple question: what would I say to a friend who was going through what I'm going through right now? And if you're interested in diving deeper into how to practice self-compassion and challenge your inner critic, I have an entire training in it in my monthly membership, the Calm and Ambitious Community. This is the exclusive membership for high achievers struggling with high functioning anxiety. And you will not only get access to the self-compassion training, but my entire back catalog of training specifically for high functioning anxiety to help you feel calmer, more balanced, and more confident from within, along with new monthly trainings every month, a live Q&A call, and a private Facebook community where you can get support and accountability. So we'd love to have you join us. You can go to calmandambitious.com to learn more and join now. And if you're watching on YouTube, leave me a comment below letting me know what you can do to start being more self-compassionate today. While you wait for next week's episode, I have other episodes about decreasing anxiety, adopting a healthy mindset, and managing your time and energy. So make sure you check out these episodes here. Thank you so much for tuning in today, and until next time, be calm.